I watched as my former boss was escorted out of the building by security, his face ashen with shock as employees lined the hallway, staring in silent judgment. Just 3 hours earlier, my phone had exploded with notifications as the entire company received an anonymous email containing screenshots of Mark's browser history, revealing not just the embezzlement of company funds, but his systematic discrimination against female employees, especially pregnant ones like me. The board members had arrived within the hour, grim-faced and furious. As I stood in the crowd watching him leave, our eyes met briefly. The recognition in his eyes when he realized it was me behind it all, that moment of pure justice was worth everything. But let me take you back to where this all started, because the journey to this moment was a roller coaster I never expected to ride. 8 months ago, I was promoted to Senior IT Administrator at TechVision Solutions, a mid-sized software company where I'd been working for nearly 5 years. I loved my job. The challenges, the team, the work environment, everything seemed perfect. Mark Davidson had been appointed as our new department head just 6 months prior, coming from a competitor with glowing recommendations and a reputation for transforming underperforming departments. From the beginning, something felt off about Mark. He was charming in meetings with upper management, but cold and calculating with his direct reports. In our first one-on-one meeting, he barely made eye contact, scrolling through his phone while I outlined my team's achievements. "These security protocols you've implemented are adequate," he said dismissively. "But I'm looking for excellence, not adequacy. I need people who can go above and beyond, not just meet basic requirements." His words stung, especially considering the security system I'd designed had saved the company from a major breach the previous year, earning me an excellence award. But I brushed it off. New bosses often want to establish dominance, right? Over the following months, I noticed a pattern. Mark praised the male team members publicly, but criticized the women in private. Still, I kept my head down and worked twice as hard, determined to prove my worth. My husband Jake would listen to my frustrations each evening, his face growing increasingly concerned. "Honey, this sounds like textbook discrimination," Jake said one night as we sat on our porch. "You should document everything." I shook my head. I need this job, especially now. I hadn't told him yet, but I'd taken a pregnancy test that morning. Positive. We'd been trying for almost 2 years, and the timing was finally right, except for this new boss situation. 2 weeks later, after confirming with my doctor, I was ready to share our joy. Jake and I celebrated with a small dinner, taking photos of the ultrasound to send to our parents. The next morning, I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement as I prepared to tell my team. Company policy entitled me to generous maternity benefits, 16 weeks of paid leave, flexible return scheduling, and even a dedicated lactation room. TechVision had been recognized for its family-friendly policies, which was one of the reasons I'd chosen to work there. I decided to tell Mark first, out of professional courtesy. I scheduled a meeting with him for that afternoon, practiced what I would say, and even brought a copy of the company's parental leave policy with me just in case. When I entered his office, Mark was typing furiously on his keyboard, not bothering to look up. "This will just take a minute," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I wanted to let you know that I'm expecting a baby in early February. I'll be taking maternity leave according to company policy, but I'm already working on a transition plan to ensure all my responsibilities are covered." The change in his expression was immediate and chilling. He looked up from his screen, his face hardening as he leaned back in his chair. "February? That's right when we're scheduled to roll out the new security platform." His voice was ice cold. "Your timing couldn't be worse." I'd anticipated some resistance, but not this level of hostility. "I understand the timing isn't ideal, but I've already started documenting all my processes and can train Thomas as my backup. He's more than capable, "This puts me in a very difficult position," Mark interrupted, completely ignoring my solution. "We're already understaffed, and this project is critical to the company's future." I slid the printed policy across his desk. "According to our company handbook, I'm entitled to—" "I know the policy," he snapped, not even glancing at the paper. "That will be all for now. I need to think about how to handle this disruption." As I left his office, my hands were shaking. This wasn't normal. This wasn't right. But you won't believe what happened next. The following morning, I received a meeting invitation from HR for later that day. My stomach dropped. This was too coincidental. I immediately forwarded the invitation to my personal email, a habit I'd developed for important communications. The meeting was set for 4:30 p.m., suspiciously late in the day. I spent the hours leading up to it in a state of anxious productivity, making sure all my projects were up to date and documented, just in case. At 4:25, I walked to the small conference room near the HR department. Mark was already there with Patricia from HR, both of them with identically unreadable expressions. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. "Please take a seat," Patricia said, her voice professionally neutral. She'd always been friendly before, but today she wouldn't meet my eyes. Mark spoke first. "We've been reviewing the department's performance and structure, and we've made some difficult decisions regarding redundancies." Redundancies? I'd just been promoted. Our department was understaffed, not overstaffed. Patricia slid a document across the table. "Unfortunately, your position is being eliminated as part of this restructuring." I stared at them in disbelief. "This is because I'm pregnant, isn't it?" The words burst out before I could stop them. "Absolutely not," Mark said sharply. "This is a business decision that's been in consideration for weeks. Your announcement yesterday had nothing to do with it." Liar. I knew he was lying. The timing was too perfect, and there had been no whispers of restructuring, something impossible to keep secret in our open plan office. Patricia looked uncomfortable, but continued with her script. "Your termination is effective immediately. We'll need your company laptop, phone, and access card before you leave today. You'll receive 2 weeks severance pay, as outlined in your contract." 2 weeks. For 5 years of service. And just when I needed job security the most. "You realize this is illegal, right?" I said quietly. "Firing someone because they're pregnant violates multiple labor laws." Mark's expression didn't change. "As I said, this has nothing to do with your pregnancy. The decision was made based on departmental needs and budget constraints." I looked at Patricia, hoping for some sign of support, but she just pushed another document toward me. "This outlines your severance package and includes information about Cobra for continuing your health insurance." My mind was racing. I knew I had legal rights, but fighting a wrongful termination lawsuit while pregnant and unemployed seemed overwhelming. But there was something else. Something that made my IT administrator brain kick into high gear. They hadn't immediately revoked my access. In fact, sitting in that room, I could feel my security badge still in my pocket and knew my administrative passwords were still active. In their rush to get rid of me before I could claim maternity benefits, they'd overlooked standard termination protocols. I knew this because I had written those protocols myself. "I'll need some time to review these documents," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "And I'll need to collect my personal belongings." "Of course," Patricia said, looking relieved that I wasn't making a scene. "Take what you need from your desk, but please return your company property to HR before leaving the building." I nodded, stood up on surprisingly steady legs, and walked out. Instead of going directly to my desk, I took a detour to the server room. My badge still worked, confirmation of their oversight. I had maybe 30 minutes before someone realized their mistake and remotely deactivated my credentials. But that's where things get really interesting. And I mean really interesting. In the server room, I quickly logged into an administrator terminal. My hands moved almost automatically as I set up a secure backdoor access to the system. Nothing malicious, just a way to preserve evidence in case I needed it for a wrongful termination lawsuit. I wasn't planning revenge at this point. I was thinking legally, defensively. Then, almost as an afterthought, I decided to check Mark's browser history. As IT admin, I had legitimate access to this information for security monitoring purposes. I told myself I was just looking for evidence of him researching how to fire pregnant employees or something similar that would strengthen my case. What I found instead made my blood run cold. Mark had been systematically searching for information on all the female employees in the department, their social media profiles, relationship statuses, even fertility clinics in the area. There were searches about legal ways to deny maternity leave and how to document performance issues for pregnant employees. But that wasn't all. As I dug deeper, I found evidence of financial impropriety. He had been accessing the company financial system using the CFO's credentials. How he obtained those was another question, and appeared to be siphoning small amounts from various project budgets into vendor accounts that I didn't recognize. I quickly downloaded everything I could find, copying it to an encrypted drive. Just as I finished, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas, my team member. HR just called asking if you're still in the building. They're looking for you. Time was up. I logged out, pocketed the drive, and headed to my desk. I gathered my few personal items, then walked calmly to HR and handed over my laptop, phone, and badge. I've removed all personal items from the devices, I said professionally. Patricia nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. I signed the paperwork acknowledging receipt of my severance information, walked out of the building, and didn't look back. Once home, I broke down in tears as I told Jake everything. He held me, furious on my behalf, and immediately suggested contacting an employment lawyer. "There's more," I said, pulling out the encrypted drive. "I found some things you wouldn't believe." Over the next few days, we carefully reviewed the evidence I'd gathered. It was worse than I initially thought. Mark had been systematically pushing out female employees since his arrival. 5 women had left the company in 6 months, all after negative performance reviews from him despite previously excellent records. The financial evidence was equally damning. He had diverted nearly $200,000 to fake vendor accounts that all traced back to a shell company with his name buried in the incorporation documents. Classic embezzlement, conducted with surprising carelessness for someone in tech. "We need to take this to the police," Jake said, "and the company board." I hesitated. What if they don't believe me? I accessed this after being terminated. They could claim I hacked their systems or fabricated the evidence. That's when Jake suggested something that would change everything. What if you don't reveal yourself as the source? What if this information just finds its way to the right people? The plan we developed was methodical. Using my technical skills, I created an anonymous email account through multiple proxies. I carefully compiled the evidence, organizing it into 3 categories: discrimination against women, financial fraud, and specific evidence of wrongful termination in my case. I researched the board members, identifying Alice Chen as the most likely ally. She had a history of advocating for women in tech and had been vocal about ethical leadership. I crafted an email specifically for her with all the evidence attached. For the wider company, I prepared a more limited email that included screenshots of Mark's discriminatory searches and hints about the financial impropriety, but nothing that would compromise company security or expose sensitive information. 3 weeks after my termination, I hit send. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By 10 a.m., my phone was blowing up with texts from former colleagues describing the chaos at the office. Mark had been called into an emergency board meeting. External auditors arrived before noon. By 2 p.m., police officers were seen entering the building. And at 3:47 p.m., Mark Davidson was escorted out by security, carrying a cardboard box of personal items, his career and reputation in tatters. But wait, it gets even better. That evening, I received a phone call from an unknown number. It was Alice Chen herself. "Is this the former IT administrator who was recently terminated?" she asked without preamble. My heart raced. Yes, it is. I thought so. The evidence was too specific to come from anyone else. Her voice was not accusatory, but thoughtful. "What you did was technically against company policy." I held my breath, but it was also incredibly brave and the right thing to do. The board has unanimously voted to terminate Mark Davidson and report his activities to the authorities. The financial team has already confirmed embezzlement of over $300,000. I exhaled slowly. "I appreciate you telling me this." "There's more," she continued. "We'd like to offer you your position back, with a promotion to Director of IT Security, reporting directly to the CTO. And of course, with full maternity benefits when the time comes." I was stunned into silence. "You don't need to decide now," she added. "Take some time to think about it. We're prepared to offer a significant increase in compensation to reflect both the new responsibilities and as recognition for bringing this situation to light." After hanging up, I sat in shock as Jake watched me expectantly. "Well?" he prompted. I told him about the offer, still processing it myself. "That's amazing," he exclaimed. "Are you going to take it?" I placed a hand on my growing baby bump, thinking carefully. I'm not sure yet. Part of me wants to, but another part wonders if I should make a completely fresh start. The next day, the story broke in the local business press. Tech executive terminated after whistleblower reveals discrimination and fraud. I watched as it was picked up by larger outlets, becoming a conversation about pregnancy discrimination and corporate accountability. 3 days later, I received another call, this time from Patricia in HR. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "I should have questioned Mark's decision. I should have protected you." "You were doing your job," I replied, surprising myself with the lack of bitterness in my voice. "No, I wasn't," she countered. "My job is to ensure company policies are followed and employees are treated fairly. I failed at both." She paused. "I've submitted my resignation." "That's not necessary," I said. "Everyone makes mistakes. This was more than a mistake, it was cowardice." She sounded resolute. "But before I leave, I'm working with the board to implement new protocols for termination decisions and strengthening our anti-discrimination policies. Your case will help protect others." After considering all options, including offers from 3 competing companies that had reached out after the news broke, I decided to accept TechVision's offer, with some conditions. I wanted to lead an overhaul of the company's ethics policies and establish an anonymous reporting system for employees who experienced discrimination. Alice Chen not only agreed, but expanded the role to include a seat on the company's newly formed ethics committee. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office, larger, with a window, and importantly, adjacent to the lactation room that I'd fought to have renovated and properly equipped. My son, Nathan, was now 2 months old, and occasionally joined me at work in the company's new childcare center, another initiative I'd championed. Mark Davidson had pled guilty to embezzlement charges to get a reduced sentence. The company had recovered most of the stolen funds and implemented financial controls I had designed to prevent similar incidents. Most meaningfully, 4 of the women who had been pushed out under Mark's leadership had been contacted with offers to return. 3 had accepted, and we were now working together to create the kind of workplace we had always wanted, one where talent was valued regardless of gender or family status. As I finished nursing Nathan before an executive meeting, my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Still can't believe how things turned out. So proud of you both. Dinner tonight to celebrate your work anniversary? I smiled and typed back, absolutely. Bringing the little boss man home by 6. Putting my phone away, I looked around at my office, at the pictures of my family on my desk, and at the email on my screen announcing the company's new parental leave policy, now expanded to 20 weeks and available to all employees, regardless of gender or how they became parents. Sometimes justice comes from standing your ground. Sometimes it comes from knowing when to strategically retreat and plan your next move. And sometimes, just sometimes, it comes from having the technical skills to expose the truth that others tried to hide. As I walked into the boardroom with my presentation on the new security protocols, Alice Chen greeted me with a warm smile and a knowing nod. "Ready to show them how it's done?" she asked. I thought about the journey of the past year, the fear, the anger, the vindication, and finally, the rebuilding of something better than what had been broken. "More than ready," I replied. "For any of you facing discrimination or wrongdoing in your workplace, remember this. Document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, even when it seems like all the power is on the other side. The truth has a way of coming to light, especially when you know how to navigate the digital trail people leave behind. And to the Mark Davidsons of the world, be careful what you search for. Someone's always watching the watchers, and sometimes they take receipts. The poetic justice of an IT admin fired for being pregnant using her skills to expose the very person who tried to push her out? That's not just a good story. That's the future calling to remind us that power dynamics are shifting, and accountability is just a leaked browser history away. So, what do you think? Did I do the right thing? Would you have done the same in my position? Let me know in the comments below.